Cerro Rico looms ominously under a stormy sky, its eerie mist creeping down to an old mining town below. Shadows flicker at the entrance of the mine, where a ghostly presence lingers unseen, whispering from the depths of history. Potosi, Bolivia, a city of ghosts and legends, where the weight of history hangs heavy in the thin mountain air. Above it looms Cerro Rico, the rich hill, once the source of the Spanish Empire's vast wealth. Its silver veins fueled the world's economy, but at an unthinkable cost. Tens of thousands of indigenous and African slaves perished in its depths, their souls bound forever to the darkness of the mines. Among the miners who still labor there, whispers travel like wind through the tunnels, stories of shadows that move on their own, of voices calling from unseen places, of a spirit who has never left. A miner murdered in cold blood, betrayed by greed, still wandering the tunnels in search of justice. Diego Ayala had spent his life among those stories. He never believed them, not until the night the ghost of Cerro Rico whispered his name. The mountain's curse. Diego Ayala had worked in the mines of Cerro Rico since childhood. It was the only life he had ever known, just like his father and grandfather before him. Every day, he descended into the depths of the mountain, swinging his pickaxe against the cold stone, searching for whatever scraps of silver remained. But Cerro Rico had changed. The silver was mostly gone, and what was left came at a steep price. The deeper they dug, the more unstable the tunnels became. Men vanished, their bodies never found. Collapses were common, and the older miners whispered that the mountain was angry. The Tío is restless, said Don Vicente, an elder miner with eyes clouded by years of inhaling dust. Something has disturbed him. The Tío was the spirit of the mine, a horned demon who ruled the underworld. Miners left him offerings, coca leaves, alcohol, even the occasional blood sacrifice, to keep him satisfied. Diego didn't believe in the Tío, but he believed in the mountain. And the mountain had rules. That morning, he and his crew entered Tunnel 26, one of the older, more dangerous shafts. The mine was silent, save for the distant clatter of pickaxes and the occasional groan of shifting rock. Then, deep in the darkness, Diego heard something else. A whisper. At first, he thought it was just the wind whistling through the tunnels. But as he moved deeper, it grew clearer. Diego. He froze. No one was behind him. A chill ran down his spine, and for the first time in years, Diego felt true fear. A warning from the past. Deep inside Cerro Rico, Diego Ayala stands frozen, gripping his pickaxe tightly. His lantern flickers, casting long shadows on the tunnel walls. From the darkness behind him, a whisper echoes, a ghostly presence unseen but unmistakable. That night, Diego sat with a group of miners outside a small tavern in Potosi, drinking warm singani and trying to forget what he had heard. "You look pale," said Roberto, a younger miner with a scar across his cheek. Diego hesitated, then finally spoke. "I heard something today." In Tunnel 26, the conversation stopped. Even the bartender, wiping down the counter, went still. "What did you hear?" Don Vicente asked. Diego took a deep breath. "Someone whispering my name." Don Vicente's face darkened. He slowly put down his glass. "Then you should stay out of that tunnel." Diego frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man leaned in. "Long ago, there was a miner named Tomas Soria. He found a hidden vein of silver, one richer than anything the Spaniards had ever dreamed of. But he made the mistake of trusting the wrong man." "Luis Aguirre," whispered another miner. Don Vicente nodded. "A fellow miner. They were supposed to share the treasure. But greed took hold of Aguirre. One night, he killed Tomas deep in the tunnels and buried his body where no one would find it. Then, as punishment, the mountain took Aguirre, too. His body was never recovered." A gust of wind swept through the street, rattling the windows. "The old ones say Tomas never left the mine," Don Vicente continued. "His ghost still lingers in the tunnels, waiting for someone to uncover the truth." Diego swallowed. "And you think that's what I heard?" Don Vicente's expression was grave. "You don't have to believe me. But if you hear the whispers again, run." Descent into terror. Diego didn't listen. The next day, he returned to Tunnel 26, determined to prove the legend was nothing more than a story. His pickaxe struck rock, over and over, until his arms ached. Then, the whisper returned. "Help me." Diego dropped his pickaxe. The voice was close, too close. His breath quickened as he turned, lantern in hand. Nothing. But the air had changed. It was colder, heavier, pressing down on his chest like unseen hands. Then, he saw it. A shadow, barely visible in the flickering lantern light. A figure standing at the far end of the tunnel, its face hidden in darkness. Then it stepped closer. Diego ran. He didn't stop until he burst out into the open air, gasping, his heart pounding against his ribs. The legend was real, and the ghost of Tomás Soria had found him. The truth buried beneath. Under the dark Bolivian sky, Diego Ayala and his fellow miners huddle outside a rustic tavern, lantern light flickering across their wary faces. Don Vicente, the oldest among them, leans in, his voice low as he recounts the chilling legend of Tomás Soria. The wind howls, carrying whispers of the past through the narrow streets. Diego sought out the only person who might have answers, Abuelo Manuel, an old miner who had long since retired. When Diego told him what he had seen, the old man nodded solemnly. "You saw Tomás." Diego exhaled sharply. "What does he want?" Abuelo Manuel reached for a wooden box on his shelf. Inside was a brittle old map of Cerro Rico's tunnels. He pointed to a forgotten shaft, long abandoned. "His body is here," Manuel said. "Still buried under the stone. If you want to free him, you must find his remains." Diego stared at the map, the weight of the decision settling over him. He had no choice. The reckoning. Armed with a pickaxe and a lantern, Diego returned to the mine at night. The tunnels were deathly silent, the darkness swallowing the light of his lantern. He followed the old map deep into the mine, past collapsed passageways and rusting equipment. Then he saw it, a skeletal hand, reaching from the earth. His stomach twisted, but he kept digging. Slowly, the remains of Tomás Soria were uncovered. The whisper returned, softer this time. "Thank you." Then the ground trembled. The mountain was shifting. Diego grabbed the skull and ran. Behind him, the tunnel collapsed, sealing the past forever. The legend lives on. Deep within the abandoned tunnels of Cerro Rico, Diego Ayala uncovers a skeletal hand buried in the dust. His lantern flickers, casting long shadows over the remains of Tomás Soria. The air is heavy with silence, but from the darkness behind him, an unseen presence lingers, watching, waiting. The next morning, Diego and a priest gave Tomás a proper burial. From that day forward, the haunting ceased. No more whispers, no more shadows in the dark. But Cerro Rico never forgets. Even today, the miners speak of Diego Ayala, the man who freed a ghost and survived the wrath of the mountain. Some say he was just lucky. Others say Tomás Soria still watches from the shadows, guarding those who labor in the darkness, ensuring no miner meets his fate again. But when the wind howls through the tunnels and the lanterns flicker without cause, the miners pause. Listening, waiting, and remembering. Epilogue. The mountain remembers. Years later, Diego left Potosi. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, he lit a candle and whispered a prayer for the souls lost beneath the mountain. Because some stories are not meant to be forgotten. And some ghosts never truly rest.